This is my Dana 30 out of my 2008 Jeep Wrangler that we're going to be swapping underneath of my 2001 Jeep Grand Cherokee. We're going to take this through all the stages of building a Dana 30, and then we're going to go ahead and swap it under the Jeep and put it to the test. This series is basically going to be building the ultimate sort of budget-friendly Dana 30 build. Well, as good as you can get for a Dana 30, they're not the strongest axles. So you're probably wondering why we would swap out the Dana 30 that's underneath of the Jeep for this Dana 30, since they're both, in the end of the day, Dana 30s, but this one is substantially better. So the one under the Grand Cherokee is a low pinion Dana 30. It's a little bit more narrow than the JK Dana 30. So the Dana 30 out of the Wrangler is actually a high pinion Dana 30, so that's substantially better for our application, whereas this one would be low pinion. This one's also a little bit wider. It's got, I believe, thicker tubes on this one, which huge improvement. That's a big failing point on these axles. This axle also has bigger ball joints, I believe, and just much stronger all around. It's still a Dana 30, so ultimately we're still probably going to break this thing. But that's where we're going to modify it, and that's what today's video is on. We're going to be doing sleeve kits, lower control arm, skid plates. We're going to be doing, we already got the gussets on here. We've got cam bolt delete plates. Got a ton of stuff for this. We've got a truss for it in the garage ready to go. And basically, I'm going to walk you through building the ultimate budget Dana 30 for a Jeep Grand Cherokee. Now we're going to be taking the housing. This will be from a 2007 to like 2018, I believe, is the final year Wrangler. And it should basically bolt in. I believe the coil buckets are going to be about a 1/4 inch on both sides out, but I'm not too concerned about that. Now we have a ton of work to do to get this thing under the Jeep and get this thing back on the trail, so let's get to work. We're going to be installing a cam bolt delete that will allow us to use the regular bolts in the lower control arms. We're going to be installing lower control arm skid plates, and we're also going to be installing sleeve kits from Barnes 4-wheel drive. So to get started, we have the lower control arm skid plates that I picked up from TerraFlex. These are kind of just like an insurance policy here. These lower control arm brackets aren't very thick metal, so this should strengthen it up and add a little bit of protection. So first up, let's clean these stock brackets up, and then we'll get the welder fired up and get these things burned on. Now I am by no means a good welder, however I'm pretty confident that the metal is going to stick together. It may not look the best, but I've gone ahead and ground one side down and then the other side it did not. Let me know which side you think looks best. And now on to the next issue. We have square holes and we need a round bolt to fit through them. That's where these plates come in from Moto-Built, and they're going to pretty much eliminate the cam bolt that the JK stock suspension used and allow us to use the regular bolts that the WJ suspension does. And as you can see, they fit really nice in there, so we just got to go ahead and weld these up. I'm going to toss a bolt through it and get these all lined up perfectly so that way we know they stay where we want them. These could also add a little bit of strength to that bracket. Between these and the skid plates, I'm pretty confident this bracket will hold up to a little bit of hits. I'm sure we'll have to replace it eventually, but for now, this will do the job. Alright, so I got that in place. Let's go ahead and weld this up, and we should be done with the lower control arm brackets for now. We're about halfway there. We got some of it welded up. We're just letting it cool off a little bit. I don't really want to warp these lower control arm brackets, but we'll go ahead and finish this and then move on to the sleeves. One side's done. Now I'll go ahead and replicate that on the other side, and we will be done with these control arm brackets. Now that we're done with that stuff, let's go ahead and install the sleeve kit. This will be the biggest and most important mod that we're doing in this video. These Dana 30 tubes are not known to be strong whatsoever, and we're going to be running 37s on this, so we could definitely use the extra strength. As you can see, these add a ton of thickness to the tubes, and they're relatively easy to install. They're basically just plug welded into place, and then you weld the end. I did opt for the welding option. I felt that that would be much stronger in the end once we're done and installed it. I will link all these products down below in the description for you guys as well. But let's move this axle back into the garage and we'll get to work installing these sleeves. Now before we do weld the sleeves in or the truss on, I do want to remove everything from this housing. That means seals, bearings, pretty much everything in here. I don't want to mess anything up. So we're going to go ahead and remove these bearing caps. You do want to make sure you remember what side these are on. Once that's out, we can remove the carrier and everything like that. But super important to remember which side these are on. I'm going to put these in little Ziploc bags and label driver side, passenger side. And that should help us keep everything in line and ready to go back in. Now this carrier is wedged in here, so a little trick is you can go ahead and toss a shop rag or a microfiber back in the gear in between the pinion and the ring gear, and then you just rotate the carrier around and that will pop it out. It'll force it up. Make sure you have these end caps loose a little bit, pop it around, and it should raise up. You're also going to want to keep the bearing races on the exact side they came off of. With that out though, you can see we got a little bit of a rust issue we're going to have to take care of, nothing too major, and we're going to have to pop these seals out before we weld onto it. And then we'll have to clean out the axle tubes to get them ready to weld in the sleeves. Easiest way I know to pop these seals out is get a socket that fits down there and then just get a bunch of extensions and pretty much just fit the seal out. Simple as that, and then we'll go ahead and repeat on the other side. These definitely look like they were overdue to be changed. Alright, so we've got our drill bits. We got a 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch. We're going to drill a 1/4 inch hole first, and then we're going to follow it up with the 1/2 inch drill bit, and then we'll be ready to weld. Now, I should have done this before I welded on that skid plate for the lower control arm, but we're going to go ahead and drill some holes now, and we're going to drill as many as we can that are fairly spaced out to weld this sleeve to. Now, with all those holes drilled, we're going to go ahead and install the sleeve itself. This should be pretty simple, so since this is a welded one, this should be a little easier to slide in, honestly. So we're going to go ahead and slide this in a few taps with the hammer, and we'll get it set properly. There's a specific depth that we're looking for here, so we're going to get this flush with the end, and then we're going to go ahead and take our calipers to 1/8 of an inch, and then we're going to measure how far in this tube is. And we're looking good for the depth. Now that's at 1/8 of an inch, we can go ahead and weld up some of these plug welds here. We're going to do all of them. I'll probably leave the top one exposed, but I'm definitely going to sand down these bottom ones to make the bottom of the housing as smooth as possible in case we hit it on rocks. And then we're going to have to weld up the end here. We'll go ahead and start with the plug welds, and then we'll worry about the end. The end will be a little bit more challenging. I'm a lot less decent at welding on circles. Alright, one down and a few more to go, but we're looking good here. I am by no means whatsoever a professional or anything like that, so any tips would definitely be appreciated. And then the end here that we're going to have to weld is definitely going to be the most challenging part for me. Alright, so we got the end welded. I'm confident it's going to hold together. However, appearance-wise, part of it's not ugly, and then the other part is very ugly. Pretty confident that it'll stick together, but any tips would definitely be appreciated there. But now it's just a matter of repeating on the other side. You guys know the drill. Pretty much clean up the housing, drill the 1/4 inch hole, 1/2 inch hole, slide in the tube to 1/8 of an inch, weld up the plug welds, and then weld up the end pieces. I'm not going to show you guys it again because it's very boring. It's the same exact process that we did on the other side. And then, like I said earlier, I did actually go ahead and sand down the bottom 2 welds to the bottom of the housing smooth. We left the top one open because it's going to be behind a truss in the end anyway. So that wraps up round 1 of upgrades on our Dana 30. We went ahead and did the lower control arm skid plates and then the cam bolt deletes for those. The cam bolt deletes were necessary because we got to use the bolts that are in the suspension on this and not those stupid cam bolts that twist, and you got all those issues that came on the Wrangler. And then the cam bolt delete plates and the lower control arm skid plates really stiffened up those lower control arm brackets. Since we're not replacing those with some upgraded thicker metal ones, I figured they could use all the upgrading they could get. And realistically, I think both of those combined was like $30, $35. A pretty budget friendly upgrade for those lower control arm brackets without having to cut them all off and weld on new ones. We have the c-gussets that should strengthen it up a decent bit. And then we've got our axle tube sleeves. That was the big one from this episode. So with all those things, we've definitely beefed up this housing a little bit, and we've got more to do. So we actually have a truss from Barnes 4-wheel drive. And then I also went ahead and picked up the track bar bracket because the one that was on the Wrangler, the hole was a little ovaled out, and I figured we'll go ahead and ditch that now before we get any death wobble problems in the future. But both of those will be installed in the next video. I'm waiting for the weld-through primer to show up so we can paint the inside and not worry about any rust issues on that. But that will be in the next one. And then beyond that, we're going to obviously toss in some new ball joints, some new upper control arm joint, new joints in the axle shafts. We're going to be keeping the stock axle shafts in this for now, and stock gears. Then the whole thing will get a full coating of Seymour paint. We got the primer and then like the big rig paint stuff that should be pretty strong for this, and then easy to touch up as well. That's one thing I learned on the axle of that. Use paint that's easy to touch up, that you can just keep a can of it because they hit rocks and everything and will destroy it. Now, I'll also be linking all of the products we're going to be using in the descriptions of all these videos throughout the entire series. None of them so far have been sponsorships or anything along those lines. I've actually paid for all of these. So we're pretty much picking the best budget, but still very, very strong and upgraded parts that we can. I think in this video, the truss was, truss the next video. Truss was like $55, I think. The sleeves were $50. Like I said, $30, $35 on the skid plate for the lower control arms and the cam bolt delete plates. For the c-gussets, I think those were $30-ish, somewhere in that range. Track bar bracket, another $26. So really, this has been a pretty budget-friendly axle build. Now, as far as tire size goes, it's on 35s right now. That being said, with these axles, we're going to be pushing it a little bit and we're going to go to 37s. Now, I know there's going to be some comments saying, why would you go 37s on a Dana 30? Reason being is this was a stock axle, none of these upgrades, and I had 37s on it when it was on that Jeep. I also really like pushing those things where everybody online is like, you can't run 40s on a Dana 44. We're doing it on that Jeep, and it's been perfectly fine for 5 years. So we're gonna be doing 37s on a Dana 30 and seeing how long that lasts. I hope not to jinx it, but I'm thinking it's gonna last for a while. And realistically, if it doesn't, we'll just go ahead and build a set of tons, as that is still the end goal with this Jeep. But I figured in stages will give us more content and grow all the social media platforms as we go and help fund some of that stuff because that's an expensive build. I also plan to take this Jeep around to all the events next year. This is going to be like our 2026 event vehicle and trail ride vehicle. I'm going to be leaving that one pretty much home and doing some much needed maintenance and upgrades on that throughout the next year. And we'll be taking this thing wheeling and to events throughout the whole year. Plan to do Smoky Mountain and a bunch of the bigger events with this Jeep. But all in all, that is the first episode of the JK axle swap under my Jeep Grand Cherokee. If you guys are liking this content, make sure you like the video and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.